classified as a third felony offender. Offense, HFC, exploitation of the infirm, and perjury. Sentencing date, November 3rd, 2014, and December 10th, 2014. Sentenced to 20 years to run concurrent for both. Parole date is June 17, 2016. Good time is September 21st, 2030. Full term is January 18, 2031. Is this information correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Marabella.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gibson, my name is Tony Marabella. How are you today, sir?
Very good, sir. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you a few questions as we go along. Would you start out by giving me your age, please?
Yes, sir. I'm 52.
52.
52.
And how long have you been in prison on these charges currently?
Right at 11 years.
Okay. Tell me in your own words, as best you can, what your role were in these two charges. Let's start off with the perjury charge. Tell me what you did. Tell me what your responsibility was and what you did.
Yes, sir. I was the chairman of a 501c3 that was involved in the New Orleans area. And it was during a civil deposition that I was questioned regarding my profession. And my testimony at the deposition was false and incorrect.
Well, I understand that. Give me
Yes,
talk to me about the underlying facts of that case. It's my understanding in reading your report, you forged some documents, you took over a corporation that you should not have been involved in. So tell me, I want you to be honest with me today about what your criminality has been in the past, because part of my decision is going to be based on your honesty. So I want you to tell me what your role is in what ultimately led to you getting in prison. I understand that there was Mr. and Ms. Pastor and Ms. Briley, you forged their signatures. So tell me about that entire plan. If you tell me you didn't do it, you can say that too. But I want to know what your position is in what you did.
That's what he's describing. Yes, sir. There were 5 charges in East Baton Rouge. 4 of the charges were dismissed. There were the signatures were never forged, but the charge that moved forward was the perjury charge in East Baton Rouge. Yes, sir.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes,
Gibson, sir. I'm not interested in the legalities. I'm interested in the facts, what you did to perpetrate this crime. Now, I have information that you forged documents, you fraudulently put together, got donations, bought property. Now, is none of that true? Are you denying all of that? I'm trying to find out exactly what your role is in all of these things before I make a decision as to whether or not I'm going to vote to let you out.
Yes, sir. I understand. No, sir. I accept and take full responsibility for what occurred.
Well, I want you to tell me what happened.
I was the president and CEO of a 501c3 regarding a piece of property in the New Orleans area. We were in the process of doing a lot of things.
How did you get involved with Love Outreach Fellowship?
It was an organization that was out of good standing with the Secretary of State's office. And
you didn't commit any fraud in gaining access to that corporation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, you did or you didn't? Poor question.
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay. Well, tell me what you did.
The company was out of good standing with the Secretary of State's office. And what we did was assume the corporation.
And then
And
what did you do that resulted in criminality?
what occurred was basically we started operating as Love Outreach Fellowship. That was the criminality of what occurred. I basically took over the corporation that Reverend Briley had initiated several years ago, and because they were no longer active and participating, and also they were no longer renewing the corporation as is required in the state of Louisiana, the Secretary of State.
What about the real estate development you were going to put together for veterans?
Yes, sir. That was in combination with the property, meaning that the owner of the property was unable
Was that
to.
all on the up and up?
Yes, sir. Utilizing the 501c3 that I had obtained.
Mr. Gibson, I walked into this hearing having read your file, believing or suspecting you were a con man. Now, I'm going to ask you to be perfectly frank and honest with me about what your dealings were.
Yes,
Everything was on the up and up. You're telling me the only reason you're in prison is because you lied at a deposition?
No, sir. Basically, because of the way that the 501c3 was set up, it
and
kind
committing
of
fraud on people, taking money from people.
Yes, sir.
I mean, can you concede that or not? We're dancing
Yes,
around. Well, tell me what you did. How much money did you take from these people?
I would have to. I believe it was in the neighborhood of about 80,000 that was involved in all of this. Yes, sir.
Well, let's talk about Ms. Seabolt. Tell me what you did in that regard.
Yes, sir. Basically, I utilized Ms. Seabolt's assets irresponsibly.
Mr. Gibson, you stole money. I mean, let's
Yes, sir.
Be honest with me.
Yes, sir, I did.
How much did you steal from her?
Her assets were in the neighborhood of about 270,000.
She had Alzheimer's, is that right?
Yes, sir. She had pre-onset of dementia, and she did have Alzheimer's. Yes, sir.
You took advantage of her, didn't you?
Yes, sir. I did.
Tell me a little bit about your education. You apparently have held yourself out to be a doctor. Are you a doctor?
No, sir, I'm not.
Well, what's your educational background? Tell me a little bit about your education.
I have graduated from high school, and I have some college.
Why were you holding yourself out to be a doctor?
I believe for credibility.
Well, for credibility. What does that mean for credibility? To get money from people?
Yes, sir. For credibility for what I was doing. Yes, sir.
And what was it you were doing?
Attempting to perpetrate this fraud, perpetrate this scam.
You have a fairly long history of doing that. You have charges in Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana. Is that right?
Yes, sir, it is.
Identity theft, forgery?
Yes, sir.
what's different today than the last time you came before the parole board?
Well, I've had an opportunity through my attorney to take an overall assessment of this entire episode and situation, what has occurred in my past. And she has enlightened me in basically seeing how wrong.
Let me stop you, Mr. Gibson.
Yes, sir.
I accept the fact that, and I've read your lawyer's material. She's a good lawyer, and I'm sure she's advised you very well. What have you learned? What has Philip Gibson learned in his time in prison through any program you've taken or anything else, the damage you've caused to people? And how is it that you're going to change? And I can feel comfortable saying, look, I'm going to let Mr. Gibson out because I don't think he's going to do this again. I haven't heard a word of that yet. You got books and papers in front of you. I don't want to hear some theoretical essay. I want to hear a man speak from his heart about why I should let him out because of all of these horrible things he's done in the past. That's what I'm interested in.
Yes, sir. I basically have had the opportunity now to look at everything, to look at the full scope of everything that I've done. And it is an accumulation that I'm not very proud of under any circumstance. And I see I've never had this opportunity to be able to look at everything. And now that I have been able to see everything, I can see what has occurred and what has transpired.
Well, let me ask you this. What have you seen that has occurred that you didn't realize was happening? You didn't realize you were ripping this lady off for $250,000? You didn't realize that all of these other charges you've had over the years, identity theft and forgery, you didn't realize those things were wrong? I'm hearing you recite facts to me, but I'm not hearing Philip Gibson come from his heart to tell me, you know, darn it, I've done some horrible things in my life, and I'll tell you why I did them, and this is why I'm going to change, and this is what I've learned. Not what your lawyer told you to say or that. I want to know what your position is, Mr. Gibson. Why should I let you out?
Yes, sir. I am, now that I understand everything, yes, sir, I am.
Well, what is it you understand that you didn't understand when you came to prison 12 years ago?
Well, since I have been incarcerated, sir, I have been able to really sit back and review everything and see what I've done and basically understand that it doesn't pay. All it does is basically just make you miserable. It makes the people that you hurt miserable because it puts things in their lives that they have to deal with that, had I not done this, would not have affected them in the way that it did. I have thought long and hard for over a number of years to try to figure out how I can basically try to find some way to fix this and to go back and possibly try to make amends for what I've done to these victims. And that has come from the different programs that I have participated in here at Hunt. And a lot of the people who have done similar things to what I have done, how it affected the direct members and family as well as friends that they have. Because not only have I affected the victims in my case, but I've also affected family members, people that care deeply about me and are very disappointed in what I've done and what I.
Mr. Gibson, Tell me some of the programs that you have taken while you've been in prison that have meant the most to you, and what did you get out of them?
Yes,
What do you
sir.
think is the most important program you've taken while you've been in prison?
One of probably the most important classes and programs was Cage Your Rage. And in that program, even though the name has a tendency to make you believe that it's about controlling your anger and controlling issues, it truly is about taking consideration for the other person, taking consideration with the person that you may have a conflict with. And before you make actions, before you do something, you should think about how it's going to affect them and how the long-term aspect is going to be. Also, probably one of the best programs that I have is called Mercy Fire here at Hunt, and we do that once a year. And at Mercy Fire, it is an opportunity for good people, the type of people that I hurt, to come into your life and to show you that there are good things in life, that crime is not a positive aspect, that whenever you do commit a crime, irregardless of the type of crime, people get hurt. And your actions carry on beyond just what's in front of you. If there was any possible way that I can go back and try to fix what I've done, and not hurt someone further by even going back and doing that, I would do it in a heartbeat, because I realize
Mr. Gibson,
I'm scared.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm scared to do it. I'm scared that if I do try to go back and try to fix what I've done wrong to these victims, that I may do more damage. I don't know. And that's probably something, unfortunately, I can't do in here.
Well, Mr. Gibson, let me ask you this question.
Yes, sir.
As I look back on your record, it's horrible.
Yes, sir.
Can you explain to me, as you're sitting here today, having reflected, having talked to your lawyer, having taken courses, why did you do these things? What was your motive? What prompted you to do those things? And why should I believe you've changed? So let's first start with, why did you do this? Was money that important to you? Was it about money? What was it about?
Yes, sir. It was about money. I was basically living beyond my means, and I was basically attempting to, I guess you could say, be something I'm not. And I figured the only way to accomplish that at that time was to do what I did, and I didn't take in to consideration the consequences of what I was doing. And I'm not talking about the consequences to myself, I'm talking about the consequences to my victims.
How many times have you been in prison?
Prior to this, once in Texas.
And tell me a little bit, have you ever had any sort of mental health treatment?
I have been under the supervision or visits with the psychiatrist here, yes, sir.
Prior to coming to prison, had you ever had any sort of mental health problems or issues?
But no, sir.
Have you learned anything about yourself after having visited with the psychiatrist there in prison?
Yes, sir.
What have you learned?
Yes, sir. I need to realize that there and have realized that there are other people in the world besides myself. And since I've been here, I've really gone, I have learned a lot more patience in regards to attempting to help people here in prison. And I guess in a personal way, it's trying to give back to everything that I have taken from
Mr.
society.
Gibson, Mr.
Yes,
Gibson,
sir.
let me ask you a question. And
Yes, sir.
and you said something that I believe probably is the most important thing that you've said yet to me. And that
Yes,
is
sir.
you've learned there that there are more important people in the world than you.
Yes,
Is
sir.
that a new revelation to you when you were visiting with this psychiatrist?
It was kind of, it's more of an accumulation of a lot of the different programs that I've been through. And the programs that I attended were also, recommended that for me to take these programs. I remember Dr. Fleming, I don't think it was officially, but she did tell me that, these are probably some programs. This was several years ago, that we're discussing, that these are particular programs that I should take. Yes, sir.
Well, how do you feel about that? What are your thoughts about what the doctor suggested to you, that you realize that there are more people, that you're not the most important person in the world?
I basically realized that when I started attending these programs, and I started hearing a lot of what was the input that was being put into the program from other offenders besides myself. And I began to hear a lot of their life stories, a lot of the things that had occurred to them, and the things that I took as being negative towards me compared to them was really nothing. That my life was a lot better than what I considered it to be compared to them, and that I had a very good life in comparison to them. And the troubles and the issues that I've lived through, or that I've considered to be astronomical, and that's an exaggeration, compared to them was nothing. Their lives were truly unbelievable. And I believe that they were being honest with what they were sharing with us at that time, because of the expression. And, it was truly a tear-felt examination of their life. And that's when I began to realize that what I have done in comparison to what they have gone through was really horrible, because I really didn't have to do it. I really didn't have to do it.
Mr. Gibson, what would you say not only to the victims involved in the case that you are in prison for today, but for all of the victims that have been victimized by you in these fraudulent schemes over your lifetime? what would you say to them today that Philip Gibson now understands and realizes that he didn't at the time?
I tell him I don't know what I can do to fix what I've done. But if there is anything that I could do, they wouldn't have to ask me twice, and they wouldn't make it fat halfway through their response.
Mr. Gibson, do you know what the word empathy means?
Yes, sir.
Tell me in your words what it means.
It is an expression of sympathy, and at the same aspect, I guess you could say acceptance, from what I understand.
I hear you saying about your victims, you want to fix them, you want to fix them, you want to fix them. But I haven't heard you say anything about the pain and the grief and the horror that they suffered as a result of what you did. I mean,
Yes,
you want to fix everything, but you don't seem to. And I believe it's probably having to do with your mental issues that you have. That maybe you're just you're trying your best to try to come to grips with it. I just don't know that you can. Warden, could you tell us anything about how Mr. Gibson's doing?
I basically just walked into, I guess you want to say this case, but I am aware. I was in contact with him prior to leaving to go to DCI, and if I'm not mistaken, he is one of the mentors. Am I correct, yes?
No, sir. I'm
tutor?
not. Yes, sir.
Right. I knew he interacted with them and with other offenders in some type of way in preparation for their transition back into society, and I didn't remember exactly that capacity personally, but I thought it was a tutor, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, a tutor. And that's about all that I'm familiar with Mr. Gibson on as it relates for me.
Good. Thank you. Mr. Gibson, you were a tutor several years ago, I believe. Is that right? Back
Yes,
in
sir.
2017, I believe it was.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And,
And
what have you done? As you were up for parole in I think it was May of last year, so a year plus ago. What have you done since then? What programs have you completed since then? I have a long list of the programs that you completed, but I don't see that you've completed anything since last time you came before the parole board. Am I wrong about that?
No, sir, you're not. The pandemic, unfortunately, shut down everything, meaning all of our programs were suspended for the majority of 2020. And we have just begun to be able to have our programs within the last month and a half.
Okay.
Faith sharing just recently has begun to start up again. During the pandemic, however, I was tutoring again in the dorm. I was a volunteer tutor in the literacy program. There are a couple of offenders that are housed with me, and we were unable to go from one dorm to the other. Each dorm was segregated. Segregated is the wrong word.
Segregated, isolated.
Isolated. Thank you, sir. Each dorm was isolated from one another. So any of the offenders that were in the dorm with me that were in the literacy program, I volunteered tutored with them.
I think that's terrific, and I commend you for that, sir. Tell me a little bit. I've got just a few more questions, and I'm going to move on. Tell
sir.
me, what sort of jobs did you have on the outside? You graduated from high school and you went to college. Where'd you go to college? You said you had a couple of years of college.
Yes, sir. I've attended the University of Florida, and
After the University of Florida, what kind of work did you do?
I worked in pharmaceuticals for several years, and then I went into hospital administration.
When you say you worked in pharmaceuticals, were you a distributor, a salesman to doctors and such? You called on doctors and such?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
How long did you do that?
Approximately 3 years.
Okay. And what did you do after that? What kind of work did you do after that? Why did you leave that? Why did you leave that field?
I had an opportunity to go into hospital administration.
Okay. And did you do that?
Yes, sir, I did.
Where did you work?
I worked for Doctors Hospital in Houston.
Okay. And what kind of work? What did you do there?
I was a physician liaison. I worked between administration, meaning I was part of the administrative team, and I worked between administration and physicians. I did a lot of problem solving.
Okay. And why did you leave? How long did you stay at that job?
I was there for approximately 2 years, 2.5 years.
Why did you leave that job?
A lot of these issues, my criminal behavior began to catch up with me, meaning that I had to start answering for my conduct.
So is it fair to say that while you were working in the pharmaceutical industry and in the hospital industry, you were committing fraudulent crimes? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did you work after the hospital?
Yes, sir. I would do different consulting jobs and things of that nature that I was hired for. The hospital chain basically would renovate hospitals, and I would go in and assist with developing the new programs and things of that nature for the hospitals. And
Go ahead, I'm listening.
I would develop new programs for the hospitals, and it was something I was very good at. My issue and problem that I had was that I was living beyond my means.
It sounds like you're a very bright man, Mr. Gibson. I mean, I have family who are involved in pharmaceutical sales to doctors. They make a very good living. I certainly know people who are in hospital administration that make a very good living. Why wasn't that good enough for you?
I was basically trying to keep up, and I guess you could say show off.
Who are you showing off to or keeping up with?
It was people that I probably should not have been around because they were on a much higher level than what I was. I didn't grow up in a very wealthy family, and I guess you could say it was that I was trying to live a life that I could not afford to live. And I regret the decisions that I made towards trying to do that.
What sort of support will you have in the event we were to grant you parole? Where would you live?
I would be staying with my parents, with my family.
And where do they live?
They live in New Orleans, sir.
Okay.
And I have a job that's waiting for me with Ideal Market, and they have stores in which is a grocery store chain, an rapidly expanding grocery store chain in New Orleans and up here in Baton Rouge as well. And I've had a lot of visitation with my family, and we have discussed a lot of the things that, sir, you and I have just covered. And they are also part of the reason why I regret and I have remorse for what I put these victims through. Because I didn't really take into consideration or understand the repercussions on the victims of what I had done. And over the years, since we've had a lot of discussion with my family, as well as the different programs that I participated here at Hunt, I've come to the realization that there are a lot of tragic repercussions of these types of crimes, that it's not just about paperwork. It is an intrusion on people's lives, and it affects them. It affects us all differently, but it affects them in ways that, from what I understand now, affects the people around, meaning it affects their families as well. Just like what I have done has affected my family. So you have to take how it has affected my family, people I love and care about, and multiply that by 100, because they are the victims. They are the true victims of these circumstances.
Mr. Gibson,
And
I appreciate your talking with me, and I appreciate your honesty. You'll have an opportunity to speak more. Your lawyer will have an opportunity to address us, but I appreciate your answering my questions. Mr. Chairman, that's all the questions that I have.
All right, Ms. Wilma, would you like to make a brief statement, Ms. Wilma Gibson?
Good morning, board members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I am Wilma Gibson and my husband, Joseph Gibson. We are Philip's parents. As Billy has Parkinson's, it is difficult for him to speak, so I will be making a statement on both of our behalves.
Go ahead.
I want to begin by telling you that although we have never lost a child, being without Philip every day, physical presence, has given us a little perspective and insight of what it would be like for someone who has lost a child. And I don't know how parents who have lost a child handle it. I do know from Philip's absence, it has taught me that it is something I never want to experience in my lifetime. I want to express that Philip's family fully supports Philip's parole. We are a small, close-knit family. Myself, his father, his brother Ronald, his sister-in-law Darlene, and a niece Brandy. Philip has the family waiting for him and has a job lined up for him to begin after his release. He has a safe home to live in with loving and supportive family who can help him while the transition back into society and begin his new, renewed life. As his family understands that Philip may have many opportunities required as a condition to his parole, such as parole mandate appointments, medical appointments, and work, we openly accept the responsibility to make sure Philip makes it to his appointments and work. And when he is released, he will be required to retake the OMV driver's classes and driving tests to obtain a new driver's license. Once Philip earns back his driving privileges from the motor vehicles and is working or participating in the reentry programs that may be required by the board, Philip will be able to assist us and Ronald if it becomes necessary to help us with our doctors and Joseph's twice a week physical therapy appointments, and as well as our household needs. When Philip is released and he earns his driving privileges back, Philip will be able to assist in caring for his family and will
Ms.
help with
Gibson.
some of the family responsibilities.
Ms. Gibson, can you please speed it up? We have other participants who would like to speak.
Okay, we have lived in our home for 50 years and attend Holy Spirit Church for over 20. We can't wait until we can celebrate a Mass with Philip next to us as a family again. We believe him living in his childhood and neighborhood surroundings will help, that was familiar with him, will help him in his succession of transition back into the community and regaining his sense of independence. I see.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gibson. Can we please now hear from Mr. Castro?
Can't hear you.
Castro from Ideal Market. Good morning, everybody. I'm here to represent Mr. Gibson as a friend, someone who was actually housed with him for 4 years, and give some reflection on him. We here at Ideal Market have employed 22 people in the last 3 years that are former offenders. And out of the 22, 21 are still with us, and they're doing quite well. It's a program I initiated because of my former offender status, and I have confidence that this will assist Mr. Gibson in his reentry. I also do a lot of work on the reentry boards and sit on some committees. I also sit on the committee of Oxford House for the entrance of it. Knowing Mr. Gibson these years, I mean, we started as friends. We actually fell out for a period because his same situation. But I don't think it's as much a situation of greed or trying to hurt others as a psychological condition. I think his best is having a steady work environment, something to be proud of, and come to the realization of who he is and what he can do just to accept himself. And that's going to come from psychological means, visiting therapists, participating in programs, and being involved in the daily workforce. I know I used Mr. Gibson as a mirror of myself at one time to see my life had to change, or I could be like that, or I was. And all this is something I'm asking the board to look at, to this man an opportunity to come face to face with the real world, get a real job, get the treatment he needs, and put this part behind him. And the next step will be him making amends. I think all this can be accomplished if he's given the opportunity. I can tell you right now, working at Ideal, he will be watched closely. He's not entering a position, financial,
Mr. Castro, can you please?
or anything like that. Pardon me?
Mr. Castro, can you please wrap it up?
Yes. So we're going to give him every opportunity possible. We'll be supportive of him. And I hope he does get this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, counsel, would you like to make a statement?
Sure, I'll just leave you with a few comments. I think that Philip is a good candidate for parole because he's got great family support and community support. And I believe he's going to have the environment that he needs to thrive if released. I think he's done a good job of participating in the community at Hunt through tutoring and Catholic Men's Association. And he's spoken to me about how he, is going to continue with, religious services. And I think with Mr. Castro and his family, he can definitely do that. Also, just wanted to point out that, he is accepting responsibility. I think it's been a really slow process, but I think he's beginning to do that. And I think he'll continue on that journey, and he has the support system to help him navigate that. Just finally, that there's no victim opposition or law enforcement opposition in this case. And so I thank the board for giving this time, and I appreciate the questions that were asked, and that's about it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And look, according to my record, counsel, we have DA opposition and we have some victim opposition. So I just want to correct that for the record. There's victim opposition and DA opposition.
Okay. Is there anyone going to be speaking, or a letter that is?
Yeah, they don't
Yes.
have to be here. They can send letters in for their objection, and we reach out to them as well. So it's all in the record.
Okay. Well, I do have another comment then that I would like to just make. I'm not privy to the information that you've received, but I do want to point out though that we did the victim of the exploitation of the infirmed case, Miss Siebold, she passed away from, natural causes after Philip was incarcerated. The only family member of hers that I'm aware of is a woman named Terry Lynn, and she was also involved in Miss Siebold's caregiving and was a co-power of attorney with Mr. Gibson. And she and I have corresponded, and she wrote an affidavit in support of his release that I provided the parole board with in March, and I sent it to you again. So there's that. And then I know that Miss Siebold, she only had one child from what I learned from Miss Terry Lynn, and he passed away, and we got a death certificate for him. So we did that was the extent of my knowledge about the victim opposition, or lack thereof for victim opposition. And
All right. Yes, ma'am. All right. Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Would you like to make a statement on your behalf?
Yes, sir. Again, I'm extremely remorseful for what I've done to these victims, and I understand what I've done and how it affected them. If there is some way that I could make amends for what I've done and how I have affected them, I would obviously do it. I am trying to find a way that I can get out and stop people from making the same mistakes that I have, and try to explain to them how I went about making these mistakes and the things that I didn't take into consideration when I did them. if access that I have through the different organizations that I'm going to become part of when I get out, or if I get out, I can explain and show what my life did and the direction and how it affected these victims and the overall implications of what my type of action does to these people, to these victims, and how it affects them. I'm going to be doing it because just like I didn't take those things into consideration when these crimes occurred, when I did these crimes, I want to make sure that they do have that information, that they do understand the things that I didn't take into consideration when I committed these crimes. It is important that someone who has my experience and my understanding as I do now get out and create some type of forum, some type of communication to stop these things from happening, to stop these things from occurring, that these things are wrong, that these things hurt people, and it affects people beyond just the here and now. It affects their futures. And if I can express that and confidently communicate how wrong it is and how it affects people beyond just what we think, then I've got to get that done. I've got to get to that point to where they can understand what happens and occurs when we commit these types of crimes. And I've done my best here in Hunt to be able to do that.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. Is the panel prepared to vote?
Yes,
Mr. Marabella?
thank you. Mr. Gibson, let me address a couple of things. Number one, Ms. Crouch, we did get all of your information. We did see it. I am aware that most of the family, if not all of the family of Ms. Seabolt are dead. They did oppose in previous hearings or at previous times. I did get your letter from the DA from New Orleans, although he was not involved in the prosecution at all. The Attorney General is opposed to his release. The East Baton Rouge Parish District Attorney is opposed to his release. So there's plenty of law enforcement opposition as well as previous victim opposition. I am aware that most of the relatives are dead. Mr. Gibson, with reference to your conversation with me, I think you've come a long way. I think you are in the process of recognizing some things that you may not have recognized before. And I believe, and I do agree with Mr. Castro that you have, in my opinion, and I'm not a doctor, psychological issues. I've looked at your diagnosis and my limited knowledge of I believe it. I understand it. Your closing argument was all about what you want to do, what you need to do, how you are going to correct all of these problems. Mr. Gibson, you need to look internally. You need to look inside of you, not what you can go out and do, but who you are. You need to look inside you to be able to find out what it is you have done and what's caused you to do that. And I believe it is part of your psychological personality. So I think that you need some more counseling, some more therapy, some more help based upon your long criminal history, the length of time that you've served with reference to what your crime is, your poor supervision history, opposition from law enforcement about what you've done here and about your getting out. I really do believe that you need to look internally to make some decisions, because I think you've got a problem that needs to be solved before I'm comfortable releasing you.
Yeah.
My vote would be to deny based upon those reasons.
Ms. Wise?
Mr. Phillip, and looking back at the notes, I was on the last panel, and when you appeared, and I had mentioned more recognition classes, and I see that you did have the victim awareness. You have taken that, but at this time, I concurred with my colleague. My vote is the same for the same reason.
We have 2 votes to deny. Also vote to deny your parole for the same reasons as stated. 3 votes to deny. Your parole's been denied. Good luck.
Well, I have to say, I particularly enjoyed the way Mr. Marabella handled this case. This guy, I have no place in my heart for scam artists like him. He really is on the bottom of the totem pole, right there with the roaches, in my opinion. And you know what I think is quite interesting about this is he probably never, in his wildest dreams, expected to be sitting there in a prison with other inmates of offenses that are not kind of like under the he probably thought he'd be going to one of those white collar prisons, one of those little villas or whatever. And no, because he got the charge of what was the technical term, exploitation of the infirmed, I think it just comes under, he gets sent to regular prison. And I think Tony hit it on the head. He just doesn't seem to get it. He seems to be missing that part in his brain where he can actually have empathy, in my opinion. And he starts off, it's like he can't help himself. He spent all this time in prison. He's here at his parole hearing, and he starts off the hearing by saying that I was a chairman of a 501c3 and I gave a false deposition. That's why I'm locked up. And you're like, dude, are you serious? You think you're gonna pull one over? Is it that much, that kind of denial that you're in, or you just can't help yourself? And he has a long history of doing this. It wasn't his first rodeo. It wasn't the first time he got caught. It's like he's not even particularly good at being a con man. Here's the article thing, and Richard shared a lot there. This guy, there are maybe over 20 pieces of information, and I'm not going to go through all of it. A lot of them are lawsuits against the prison system for he hurt his leg, he's suing the doctor there. It's like he's nonstop trying to, what's the word? Just like a leech on society. And it's like a mental illness, I think, that Mr. Marabella was kept on tapping into. I believe that there's something just very wrong with the way he thinks. And Gibson was arrested in October after allegedly stealing the name and tax information of Love Outreach Fellowship in an effort to solicit donations for war veterans. It's like he checks every box: the infirmed, war veterans, and it I guess the only thing were like kids with cancer is what he was missing, right? But he claimed to be building for NGOs. The Attorney General's office alleges Gibson stole the information from Baton Rouge couple, then used it to obtain the dilapidated Higgins Gate apartment complex. Gibson had the apartment complex demolished, but he never removed the debris from the 7.8-acre site, drawing the ire of nearby residents and community leaders. He was booked with filing and maintaining false public records. So it's like, again, he illegally obtains this non-for-profit, which he somehow gets his hands on this property, then demolishes it. Who knows what he was thinking or where his scheme was going, right? And then leaves it demolished, which pisses everyone off. And then so then of course he gets caught. It's not like you can't, you can't just do something like that. And then it's like waving a giant red flag saying, let me piss everyone off and think I'm just going to walk away without any worries. But then in more recent case, Caldwell said Gibson lived near the elderly victim. Listen to this. He forced himself into her life due to her illness. He represented himself as her grandson. He literally went there and said, "Hey, I'm your grandson. You can't remember me." How sick is that? How low is that? And what did he say? Like, the words that he used too when Mr. Marbella said, "How much money did you take from her?" And he said, "Well, she had assets of like 260,000. Not I stole 200." And we'll get to that. When investigators examined the bank records, it became clear that Gibson diverted money from the woman's account for his own personal uses, including online dating sites, which Caldwell said was a violation of his power of attorney. Caldwell said that given the victim's mental state, he was unable to authorize those personal purchases, and Gibson did not have any sort of compensation package worked out prior to assuming the role. So he says he's the grandfather, and then he somehow gets power of attorney. You can't just buy things for yourself because you have power of attorney. There has to be some sort of benefit for the other person. So he thought that he could just get away with it because he has power of attorney. He is also accused of using the victim's accounts for paid for his homeowner's insurance, nights on the town, a car, and $7,000 in attorney fees. He even used the victim's money to pay for expenses related to Love Outreach Fellowship, the not-for-profit he's accused of falsely claiming an affiliation with in order to secure donations. I wonder how much money in donations he took to help veterans, right? He's bleeding the lady dry, Caldwell said. He was using her funds to finance the scheme for which he was indicted. Oh, right. I forgot to add. And he pretended to be a doctor. That was great. He pretended to be a doctor. So here's an article, and thank you, Richard, for finding this. Someone wrote this. It's like a blog post or something. And it's interesting to see what she writes. So, busted of Love Outreach Fellowship. You are a scumbag for trying to exploit veterans and using a bogus non-for-profit to try and get people to give you money. This is probably very therapeutic to read, right? Yes. I have zero instincts when it comes to judging people. I assume everyone is wonderful, and if they are not, it usually bites me in the arse later. My husband is one who balances me out in that department. Now, this local heart doctor, who supposedly did some internship work in Iraq and now had a heart for veterans, wanted to build an apartment complex for wounded veterans who wanted to go to school full time. Sounded like a fabulous project with my name all over it. Being a huge troop supporter, and of course, I was interested. A friend of mine referred me to him when he was approached about people coming on board for his business venture. Phil was looking for a PR media manager who supported the troops and understood a lot about military works, and I fit the bill. So here he is trying to hire someone, her, to be a PR manager. I Googled the doctor before our first meeting, which was actually a supposed job interview. Something about him did not sit right as I cannot find him anywhere on the internet. Maybe a different spelling I wasn't aware of. I even had two of my best web surfing friends I know Google him, and they came up empty too. Well, she's smart enough to do that, right? After our meeting, he told me how he and his friend invented some awesome heart thing. So I went home and Googled him some more. I even called John Hopkins, where he supposedly did his heart training, and came up negative. I mean, she did her homework. She starts off by saying she just trusts everyone, but I don't think she's giving herself enough credit. She asked for $80,000, and he said I was hired, but he cannot pay me now, and that I would have to put some sweat equity into the business. I agreed to meet him again, and even though I was uneasy about him, I met him alone on the blighted property of the soon-to-be home for wounded veterans. He also drove me around Algiers to show me the area, and I was unfamiliar with it. Meanwhile, my business partner had been doing some more Googling on him, and things really did not sit right. The non-for-profit turned up to have the address at an abandoned steakhouse. Phil was pushing me to commit to upcoming press conferences and really pushy about needing me to come aboard immediately with sweat equity. Following my request for his resume to better understand a potential client, my former business partner stepped in and proposed we invoice him through our company with a contract and 3 months gratis work. We never heard from him again. Today, ED Twittered me this news story, and I was not surprised at all. I called a friend who referred me, and he got wind that something was not right with this guy either. Always dangerous making references. If you don't really know someone, you got to be careful before you refer a friend to them. Phew, for once, my instincts served me right. I could have put my face out there for him and asked people to donate to his bogus charity and ruin my credibility I had as a military resource. I hope they throw the book at him. And you'd be happy they did throw the book at him. And it's he's thought, oh, I'll go get this, I'll hire this person, she'll be the face of my company, she'll make the press releases, she'll raise the money on my behalf. And it's like he would do anything and stop at nothing to steal money from people donating funds to veterans. And I guess that's what he did. So he had, it's a whole scheme that he planned out. He thought he'd be so brilliant. He takes over a non-for-profit. He could open his own non-for-profit. It's not that complicated. It's not that expensive, but no, he takes over a non-for-profit. He convinces an elderly woman who has Alzheimer's that he's her grandson. Gets power of attorney, uses some of her money, ended up being like 250 grand or something, to, it seems, buy this dilapidated property, knock it down so that he can then raise money and say he's building property for veterans, and he was going to obviously take more in donations. But it's not easy to raise money even though you have a non-for-profit and a property. So he's trying to fit the puzzle pieces together. Well, if I can get this woman to be the face of my company who has a marketing background and a reputation, then I can do it. The energy that he put into this, and it was all going to be a scheme just to pad his pockets. It's sick. It's more than just trying to steal money. It's like a passion. And he just didn't seem to be able to identify any of it. So here's the next. There's like one of his appeals. So it says that he allegedly violated the exploitation of the affirmed statutes when he used funds from the bank account of the elderly lady under his care, who was, and here it is. He has 10 prior felony convictions. 10. I mean, this guy is bad at scamming people. That's how many times he was caught. Allegedly misappropriated. Yeah, he took $253,000 of her money. And remember, he said, I believe she had assets of, not I took it. It's like everything, it has to be a twist of words. He just can't help himself. And remember, he started off the hearing by what did you do wrong? What did you do wrong? I gave a false deposition. That's how he started. He can't make it up. He represented himself as a medical doctor, executive director of a not-for-profit organization. He accepted donations under false pretenses and attempted to bribe a pastor. Oh, here we got another one. He attempted to bribe a pastor, declare his name. Man, this guy just has no boundaries. Gibson is currently in custody and awaiting trial. December 27, 2011, he filed a writ habeas corpus, the 4th district, and it was denied. I mean, then it just goes into a lot of details about this and about that, and he has a lot. I mean, there was too much for even me to go through. It's just article after article after article after article of every appeal and every seeming to me frivolous lawsuit. Just my opinion, but we don't see a lot of these type of cases here. We really don't. And I think it's because they don't typically end up in, it's a good question. I don't know. I'm not familiar with we don't see parole hearings of people who are in for white collar type crimes. And here he is serving with every other type of he's not even on work release, right? This is no slap on the wrist sentence. They threw the book at him and they put him in a way where he's serving with hardened criminals. And I bet he never expected that. Anyways, he's not at no summer camp, but happy you're here. He's still locked up. He's still got plenty of time left on his sentences. 2030 is his good time. 2031 is his full time. So when he gets another chance at parole, we will cover it. But man, I mean, he's gonna have to get better at his. You would think from a con artist that he would be better. That's the truth. He would be better at putting on the front, putting on the show, but he's not. And I guess that's part of why he's been caught so many times. He's just not. He thinks he's sophisticated, but he's not that bright or not that insightful. Maybe he's not aware of how other people perceive him. Perhaps I'm not sure. But anyways, with that, I'll let you go.